الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time with the first chapter, Surah Fatiha. How has it been going for people who have been trying to memorize or kind of pick it up? Has anybody been able to memorize the first few verses? Yeah, you have? No? Why did you raise your hand?
But I feel like when I try to say it, it's going to happen again.
Yeah. You did?
I think I have it,
Yeah? How's it going for you?
So far, so good.
Really? Amazing. Do you want to say it first?
We'll try it.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Allahu Akbar. One second.
It's okay.
I haven't done it in public before.
Well, why don't we do this?
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to put people on the spot. Maybe we could take a quick minute because I know everyone doesn't know everyone else. If you can turn to the persons next to you, maybe introduce yourself. Talk about how did your Eid go? I know for some of you it was your first Eid. And for some it's one of many Eids you've experienced. And if you feel up for it, maybe you can just talk to the person next to you. And if you're learning Fatiha, just kind of say to them, where you're at on it thus far. And, if you're comfortable saying what you've learned so far, or how that process has been going. And then we'll come back in like a few minutes and get started. Yeah, but go ahead. Okay. So how was Eid for people? How did it go? Yeah? It was nice? Yeah. What did you guys do? Mine was crazy. Yeah. As always. Did I nap on the day? No, I didn't. The Eid nap is...
Did you get any nap after Eid?
I did not. Yeah. But, one day soon. Yeah. Are you squinting at the board? Luna, you're wearing glasses? You can't see? All right, bigger.
Oh, that's okay. I wouldn't have bring it.
Okay, let's get back. We'll get started. So, how was Eid for people? What did you all do on Eid? Spend time with family? That's nice. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I fasted the day before. This is my first time fasting with like full fidelity.
Nice.
And that was my situation.
Yeah? What made it nice?
I guess the effort to restrain myself from certain things, even not listening to music, I listened to music that day. And then abstaining from impure thoughts, just seeing how those things come in throughout the day. So being extra vigilant and mindful of those things. The experience of not eating, waking up early to eat, it was just a different mode of experience.
Amazing. Yeah, and that's one of the ideas, right? In the Quran, we talked about this going into Ramadan. When it talks about fasting, it says, لَعَلُّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that perhaps you might obtain kind of God consciousness. But the idea isn't that you're just conscious of the thought, but you're conscious of your ability to be conscious of something. Does that make sense? Like you see the difference in the two things? I'm not just like aware of what I'm eating or not eating, but I'm aware of my capacity to be aware. And I can contrapose that to moments where so much is done mindlessly. I'm just throwing food in my mouth without thinking about it. I'm just like saying whatever comes out of my mouth, So the capacity to be aware of your ability to be aware is kind of what the root of that is. Did anybody else fast the day before? Yeah, how was that for people? Yeah. I like when I ask a question and people just kind of smile and nod, but it means nothing. Like, like it can mean 5 million different things. Do you know what I mean? It's like when a baby cries, you're like, why is the baby crying? And it's the same thing as an adult. Just smile and nod. Yeah. Why are you smiling and nodding? Yes.
I was proud of myself for making it through the day because it's my first summer fast.
Yeah.
And I was really worried about that. I was going to pass out, but it was actually not that bad. I fasted the day before, so it was, I guess, easier for me to do the second day as well.
Nice.
Inshallah, next year I can do all 10, but starting with the 2 is good enough.
Inshallah. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
I fast. I couldn't go the whole time, but I had some prayers to catch up on, so I caught up on a bunch of prayers that day. So I felt really good about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Like I said, a couple Wednesdays ago, I was going to eat the pie for us, and I did it.
No, yeah.
I ate it for us.
Paya's cow feet. That's what he ate for us. Be grateful that you had someone eat that for you and you didn't have to eat it yourself.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought it was great. It was my first time ever fasting as well. And I feel like the mentality, like I came into it when I woke up in the morning was like, I'm going to eat, and then it's like I'm going to do this, but like kind of like in like building my adrenaline in a way, like to make it through the day. But to be honest, the day felt like really calm and like sort of like speaking what you said, like very aware of different things. So I didn't listen to music, and I deleted my social media for the day as well. And then like it was just a very like calming peace of mind.
Amazing. Yeah, and what we're also doing, right, is something that we'll talk about as we go through the remainder of this chapter today. We're going to try to get through all of Fatiha today, the first chapter. If you missed like the first few weeks, we have it all recorded. If I seem a little bit kind of like gasping, I don't know why I'm wheezing, but I'm wheezing. So forgive me for that if I'm not talking as fast as I normally do, which might be a blessing for some people. But we're going to get through the whole thing, and you're going to see as a theme in Fatiha that there's a lot that talks about like us as opposed to just individuals when you're kind of reciting the chapter. Anyone else? How did Eid go? Or if you did fast on the day before Eid, it's called the day of Arafah. How was that for you? It can also be difficult, right? It doesn't have to be like super easy. Did anybody do anything super fun on Eid? Yeah.
So there are a few people here that hung out with the conversations group, and I think the conversations were really fruitful.
Oh yeah. Where did you guys hang out?
Solo's apartment.
Oh, you went to Solo's house?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
It's really great.
Solo's
Oh,
here.
there you are.
He wasn't invited.
Yeah.
Solo gave the shadiest announcement the night before at Iftar. I was like, Solo, come tell people about the dinner. He's like, we're going to meet someplace in Astoria at some person's house. It's like, it's your house, dude. Why are you talking in the third person about yourself? Nobody knew what he was discussing. Yeah, it was good. It was fun.
Yeah, it was really great, and also just being around others who had similar feelings of wanting to be accepted in the community and sharing kind of struggles, but also wins, I guess. And,
Nice.
it was really lovely.
So we're gonna start again soon the monthly brunches at our apartment, my apartment, which is that's what a lot of the kind of tenor is. It's potluck, people come together, and it's just a space for people who are exploring Islam to speak with people who are recent converts or people who converted a while ago, as well as people who are kind of family members, friends, etc., of people who are in either of those categories, and kind of jumpstart other programs as well. Any other thoughts on Eid, Arafah fasting before we move into what we're going to discuss tonight? Yeah, no? Great. So we want to get through the remainder of the first chapter just so people can start to really deepen in the memorization part to it, and then we can start getting into the other aspects of the prayer itself. So in the Hanafi school, which is the legal school that we're looking at, the recitation of Fatiha, the first chapter, is not what's an obligation of the prayer. It's not a fard, it's a wajib it's a necessary act, right? So for those who are just rebuilding a relationship with their faith, people who are new to Islam, there's also a format in just how you can learn the prayer itself and kind of go at a pace that makes sense. So we want to try to get the Fatiha down soon. So if you can really put in some time to memorize it as best as you can, at a pace that makes sense for you. But over the next few weeks, we want to start to get that situated so that we can start going through the other parts and memorizing that well. And like last time, how Kiara gave some tips on what was helpful for her as she was memorizing and transliterating in ways that were more conducive to her own personal kind of memorization. If you have ideas and things, feel free to share that as we kind of discuss. So we looked at the first 3 verses already. This doesn't work. That all speak about like God in some capacity. So the first one says, Alhamdu Lillahi Rabbil Alameen. Does anybody remember what this means? Alhamdulillah, what did that mean?
All praise to God.
Yep. Any other thoughts on the rest of the verse or that word? Yeah.
You did a nice job focusing on rub, what rub meant.
What does it mean?
You were talking about like in our context, like our Western context, most people would think it means Lord. Like you gave a medieval times type of reference, but you kind of went into a lot of things like it means much more than that, like Malik.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in the interest of time, maybe I'll do, because we haven't met in a couple of weeks, right? It's been 2 weeks since we met. So, alhamd refers to praise and thanks, right? Because you can praise something without being thankful, and you can thank something without kind of being praising it in some capacity, right? So remember, Giuseppe was here a few weeks ago. He's sick today. He's got a cold. So say a little prayer for him and his healing. But he was wearing this really vibrant sweater. And if I said, wow, that's a nice sweater, I'm not thanking him for wearing the nice sweater. I'm praising the sweater. I was like, thank you for wearing nice clothes to the class, right? But you can thank somebody without praising them and praise somebody without thanking them. Does that make sense? And this combines both. For God, Rabb, as was mentioned, is not just Lord, but it invokes the idea of being a caretaker, a nurturer, one that is kind of in charge, but also making decisions, is an ownership, is the giver of a gift, and blessings. There's a lot that goes into that. And Alameen essentially is everything that is not Rabb, right? So God uniquely is the one that is the Lord of everything, and everything else fits into this category of Alameen. And then verse number 2 said, Ar-Rahman Nir-Rahim. And there's shared roots here. So Rahman is something that means compassionate or merciful, but it's got its own nuance of gentleness, softness, love, mercy. It's not mercy like in a kind of supremacist anti-black system that sees everything in these kind of frames of justice and mercy in that way, right? Because then you're not thinking about it in terms of its element of love or softness or kindness and gentleness. Rahman fits into form that denotes something that is emphatic qualitatively, right? So if someone said, I'm so exhausted, like exhaustion is me, then you'd say, ana ta'ban, right? If someone said, you're so lazy, right? That laziness is you, you'd say, anta kaslan, right? You can hear the same kind of sound, Rahman, kaslan, ta'ban. Does that make sense? And it denotes something that's temporary, because I can be super exhausted, and I can go to sleep, and then I'm not exhausted anymore. Rahim denotes continuity to it, like it keeps going, right? And both are now there as an introduction. The way I asked you all to tell each other, like, who you are, what are your names, how is Eid for you. You chose to self-select to say, this is me, in your introduction. So this is how, in the Quran, God introduces himself to the reader. The very first thing he's saying is, I'm a loving, compassionate God that is watching over you and all of creation. And that's like the introduction that's there. And then the third verse said, Maliki Yom Middin, the master of the day of judgment. Right? And we talked about these three in some detail, so we won't go through it all. But these are things that are going to be important as we go into the next few verses. Because the chapter in and of itself has a lot of balance and symmetry to it. And it builds off of the initial verses in the latter part of it. So the next verse, which is a new one that we're looking at, in the fourth verse, it begins, Iyaka na'budu. And the apostrophe is just to indicate the letter Ain, which we haven't gotten to. And when we get to the end of class, hopefully somebody did something with the letters that we talked about a month ago. And that says, Wa iyaka nasta'in. Can somebody open the translation and read what that fourth verse of the first chapter says? In whatever translations you have? Yeah, go ahead.
It is you we worship, and upon you we call for help.
Great. Does yours say the same thing?
You alone we worship.
Yeah, and what's the rest of it say?
You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help.
Yeah, great. So embedded in this is a couple of different things. The idea here is not framed in an imperative. So when you go through the first three verses, you're just talking about who God is. And if you remember when we talked about the word Rabb, we said that it's the kind of word that it denotes a relationship. Like if you're a teacher, then by principles of logic, you have students, right? If someone says you're a husband, then you have a spouse. You're a father, you have children. Does that make sense? You don't have to say, I'm a father of children, to say that you have children. Like if I said to you, I'm a father, you're going to assume that I have children, right? So the word Rabb denotes that if this is like the word Lord, then you are a lord over something. Do you know what I mean? And in Arabic, the complementary word for this is abd. It's got the same letters here, right? Ain, ba, dal, abd, na'budu. So when you're saying iyaka na'budu, you alone we worship, everything you need to know about who you're worshiping is in those first three verses. Does that make sense? And when it's saying iyaka na'budu, it's not grammatically in an imperative. The verse doesn't say, worship me, I'm the most merciful and compassionate. Worship me, I'm the master of the day of judgment. It now moves from describing who God is to making an affirmative, Iyaka na'budu, that you alone do we worship. Meaning that there's a choice in all of this. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? That fundamentally, your ability to now determine what it is that you are a worshiper, and this is like a big part of just Islamic doctrine. it gives accountability to an individual through the idea that you get to choose your choices. And so the way the language is structured, it's saying that you alone do we worship, and you're making it as a statement, right? I am worshiping you. I worship you, you who is worthy of all praise and thanks. I worship you, you who is the Lord of everything. I worship you, the most compassionate, the most merciful. I worship you, the master of the day of judgment. But I'm choosing to worship you. You're the only thing that I want to be an abd of. I don't want to be an abd of wealth. I don't want to be an abd of anything in creation. I don't want to be a worshiper of my physical beauty or of materialistic things. I just want to be a worshiper of everything that I know you have helped me to know who you to be. Does that make sense? Now you got to think about this in the frame of that kind of relationship on a human level. If somebody is in a place where they have an individual, an entity, an authoritative body that now determines how you will be, most people don't necessarily end up liking those people, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So it's not always like the most amazing experience that you have with the principal of a school, or elders that tell you what to do or not to do, or engaging in that kind of relationship that has now do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs that are not morally relative. So there's a deep wisdom in being able to understand that when God is introducing himself to you, he's first telling you, like, hey, I'm a God that, like, loves you. And when you're choosing to worship me, don't just worship me as the creator, because he doesn't say Al-Khaliq in his introduction. He says Ar-Rahman. Like, you can believe that God created everything. That doesn't mean that you believe God is the most merciful or the most compassionate. Does that make sense? And so when you're making this statement, whether you're conscious of it or not, but the idea is to have consciousness, you're making a statement that says, I choose to worship you. I'm not choosing to worship like something else, and I'm also not choosing to worship a skewed understanding of who you are. I'm worshiping who it is that you've told me you are. And these things in these three verses, if you don't know anything else about God from an Islamic doctrinal standpoint, this is all you need to know. There's a reason why it is a chapter that's recited again and again, because it's giving the fundamental foundational understandings that any person who practices this religion needs in order to know who their God is. Does that make sense? Any questions on that so far? We're going to come back to this verse because it's the middle verse. And this chapter is balanced over 7 verses. And this becomes like the center verse that pulls both of the subsequent 3 verses and the previous 3 verses together. There's a connection there. But everything that goes into na'budu is rooted in these 3 verses. This is who you're worshiping when you say na'budu. And when you say you alone, it means I'm choosing to worship you actively. It's my choice. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Then in the latter part of it, you're going to have the same words. Wa means and. Iyaka, only you. Nasta'een, it'll talk about help and aid. Isti'ana in Arabic is a very particular kind of help, right? It comes from the Arabic word aun. And it's not help that is something like, I don't know, an example. Let me try to think of an example that isn't anything terrible. Like, this is a kind of help that assumes that you're also trying as you're seeking help. Does that make sense? Right? Like, if we came in here, I was like, guys, can you just stack up the chairs? And everyone's like, yeah. And then I just sat here and ate all the cookies, right? That's not you helping me in this sense of isti'ana. That's me being lazy and not trying anything. Do you get what I mean? But if I walked in the room and I'm putting down all of the chairs and stacking them up, and then you came and you were like, hey man, you're an old man, right? And I was like, you're right, I can't do this by myself. I just simply don't have the ability to do it alone. You know? Like if I tried to carry this and you saw me struggling with it, right? And I turned to you and I said, can you help me carry this? And it's not that I'm not trying to do it, but I get to a point where I recognize I can't do it without you. That's isti'ana. Does that make sense? And it's very different from other kinds of help. Language is really important when you're reading the Quran, even if you're reading the translation, because you want to think about words that are there and words that are not there, right? If I'm in such a state of desperation and I'm super run down and I'm just like out of it, and you came and you were like, Khalid, what happened to you? I was like, just help me. Then you might be able to have consideration in that state where it looks like I've been crying a lot, I'm like lost a ton of weight, I clearly haven't been sleeping, and I was just like, help. Then you don't need anything further to qualify the help. Does that make sense? But in most instances, if there's something that I'm asking for your assistance on, I'm going to need to qualify what I'm seeking your assistance on, right? So if I was like, Danish, help me. And he was like, okay. And then we just sat and stared at each other. I'm like, why aren't you helping? He's like, because, stupid, you didn't tell me what to help you with, right? I can't just say help me and not say help me with what. Does that make sense? So you need to have something that is what you're seeking.